BG3 already got its first hotfix, and we'll go over some of those changes very briefly. We also did get some Metacritic scores in, and a few neat tricks to help your playthrough as well as performance. We got a lot to talk about. What's up, World Streamer? Back in the video, we're checking out all things BG3. Okay, so first up, let's just jump right into the hotfix. We'll go over some of those major changes. They obviously had a bunch of performance fixes and crash fixes, so if you've been having any issues with the game, make sure you do update to this hotfix 1. There's also some major fixes for multiplayer, one of those being that players will now correctly join a cinematic dialogues that require all players to be present if they were listening in previously. And I guess you were able to even listen in on players to their private dialogues, so people were able to kind of connect in and see what you were saying privately. And you can set certain dialogues to private. If you do have those private, now they will not be able to access conversations. Kind of a major bug if you really wanted to have certain things locked down. Now the drow and the elf male did get their hair physics fixed. This was in particular to the strong body types. They also fixed an issue with the rolls. Essentially, if you were retrying the roll after you failed and you applied bonuses to it, if you were clicking really fast, it would essentially automatically fail, or at least cause the roll to fail. They also fixed a major issue with duplicate spells. They no longer appear on followers' hotbars, and you can no longer customize their radio menus. So now you should be able to do that properly, and there won't be any confusion there. I won't spoil anything specifically with this person, but essentially there was an issue with one of the people in your camps. This person might not be there for you, but if they are, there was an issue with interacting with them. So if you had any issues there, that has now been fixed. They fixed an issue with unequipping and equipping armor on certain character models. This goes for half-orc, dragonborn, and half-elves. Essentially, they were not updating correctly. They also did hide the version number during dialogues. I know that was a major complaint. People were saying, why do I have the version number? I know I should have had that in early access, but why do I have that now? Yeah, I definitely agree with that. There should have been an option for it, although I don't think anybody would want it on during the cinematics. So yeah, I'm glad they did fix that from feedback incredibly fast. They also fixed an issue with split screen. There were some sampling issues, and so that should be good now. This was specific to cinematics. It's a decent amount of audio fixes here as well. They also fixed a few engine tweaks like surface textures not updating when changing texture detail, and even a fix for FSR, which had an issue during split screen. There's a ton of fixes for the cinematics, but I'm not going to go over them. It's mostly so just fixing like orientation with the camera or lighting or being blocked in certain scenarios. The reason being is there's a ton of spoilers here, and they even have some of these like blanked out, so you can't just instantly see them. Yeah, it's mostly just general fixes there with camera, lighting, clipping, audio. That should cover it for the hotfix portion. Now we did actually get the Metacritic scores and even some user scores in. Currently, Baldur's Gate 3 is sitting at a 94 on Metacritic and a 9.3 user score. I do think when this launches on PS5, it's going to have a bit higher of a Metacritic score, so it might even be higher than a 94. However, if the PlayStation does experience any technical difficulties, this might be a bit rough. However, typically from what I've noticed, PlayStation and Xbox games always do rate a bit higher than the PC releases. Now, this could also be due to the majority of games that get released now are a port to PC and not to console. However, I do think that typically they do rate games slightly higher on the consoles than they do on PC, which seems to have a much more critical audience. We'll have to wait and see on that, but the reception and the 94 is incredible, and I'm so glad that this game is getting that reception it deserves. Which moves on to my next article here by Windows Central. We said here that Baldur's Gate 3 is defying game industry trend chasers and is being rewarded for doing so. It is kind of sad to see that this game isn't the standard anymore. At one point, these type of games were definitely the standard for RPG, as well as any other industry. It seems like things have definitely dived down in quality, as well as just making everything pay to win, microtransactions, battle passes, everything just being sold on the store. It really is sad to see gaming go down this path. Now, it all started from Oblivion Horse Armor, and yeah, back then, even people weren't putting up with that. Now, it just seems like gaming went too mainstream, and the majority of people don't really care. Even explaining pay to win to people, I've had people tell me that Lost Ark wasn't pay to win. It just doesn't make any sense overall, but yeah, it is sad to see that gaming is in this sort of state, although it is nice to see that we are still getting the occasional game that kind of does do away with those new trends or whatever you want to call them. I wish we had a few more of these, although we do have some big releases coming out in the next few weeks, so hopefully those games as well cannot chase these new trends. And even commenters here jumping in on the Diablo 4 train, which yeah, anybody that worked on Diablo 4 that has words about BG3 should probably not be taken seriously. The game only had 9,000 people work on it, an infinite budget, yet can't even get a minuscule of what BG3 offers. It is what it is though with that. Moving on to more lighter news, BG3 did actually get into the top 10 of all time, which is just absolutely insane and awesome to hear, and glad that they are reaching these high numbers. Crazy to think that Elden Ring was at 150,000 at its peak. I do think BG3 deserves to be up there, and I do hope that they continue to get sales this way. Now, there are some performance tips here by some individuals. However, I've not fully tested these, but yeah, this first example is pretty common. So if you do use exclusive full screen, your performance will probably significantly increase. I typically always use exclusive full screen. A lot of games don't offer exclusive full screen over the borderless windowed mode, but this game does, and I would definitely recommend using it. The only downside to exclusive full screen is that alt tabbing is much slower. Your monitor might also flicker to a blank screen. However, I'm mostly on the game and I'm not really alt-tabbing quite often, so I don't mind this way. For certain multiplayer games, I definitely would prefer to have the borderless window mode so I can alt-tab constantly. But yeah, this person claims that they doubled their FPS at 4K. I'll have to try this out and see the differences in the exclusive full screen mode and not. And I'll put an updated comment down below if I see any frame jumps there. Now, there are actually some keybinds that will help your playthrough and speed up your times, which is the F5 and F8 key. The F5 key will quick save and the F8 key will quick load. It's essentially so you don't have to go through the menus and constantly save your game or go through the individual there. I know for me, I am constantly saving my game. I probably already have over 100 saves. I do it quite consistently to make sure of anything that goes wrong or anything that can happen. The more the merrier, and yeah, if you have the hard drive space, it shouldn't really matter anyways. I believe you can also re-keybind those if you want it on a different key. You don't have to have it on F8. And for people that are on lower than 70% keyboards, I'm on a 65%. I have the F keys, but they're under my function key, so I have to use my function key in tandem with those other keys. However, I do believe you're able to re-keybind that to something easier. Also, a major adjustment for your playthroughs. If you are finding that you want to make a passive playthrough, or even in certain scenarios where you don't want to down enemies completely, there is actually an option here where you can just knock out an enemy. This will be under your passives tab on the bottom section of the hotbar. And so if you ever want to feel like you need to do a passive approach or even a passive playthrough, this is actually an option that I myself missed in the first time in EA, but I did realize it going into release. And one last tip here, if you are having issues with saving your game in cloud saves, I do recommend turning off cross saves for now. This completely fixed it for me, and even on launch day I had no problems. Realistically, cross save doesn't even really work right now, more so, since there really isn't a way to play on another platform. And yeah, not even Mac OS is out right now, so you might as well disable the cross save. If you do need to go back to a specific save on another platform, I'd recommend just saving or going back and loading that save and then enabling cross save and then resaving at that point. Although that's very specific scenario based. So yeah, I would just turn off cross save for now, and it made it so much easier and my saves are near instant. Also, if you've been watching my Wizard guides, I might do an updated guide for Wizard here shortly. I do want to get my character to level 5, which I am nearing up on, I do believe. There's some things that changed from the early access version to the main version. Mostly starter scroll locations, and there is 1 or 2 spells that I switched out. And there are a few new ones that I find to be absolutely incredible. One of those being Knock, which I find absolutely insanely good for Wizard, since we don't really come across lockpicks that often and we're not playing the Rogue class. It is nice to essentially have a spell that unlocks pretty much anything. But yeah, that should about cover for today's video. If you like it, and subscribe. Until the next one. Deuces.